Once the rocket's up in space, the top part of the rocket will separate, and then M2, which is one of the many satellites on this mission, will be ejected out of the rocket and enter orbit around the Earth. We'll start off as one connected satellite approximately 3 months after being up in space, and once it's been completely tested and we know it's working as it's meant to, it'll then separate to 2 separate satellites. And this allows us to conduct, a lot of research from the separation itself, and we'll then be able to conduct formation flying. So the satellites will fly together.
Why fly in formation? There's a number of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that it means you can test inter-satellite communication links, and we will be attempting to do that and demonstrate on that mission. You can test the understanding of the way that these spacecraft interact with the environment up there, and that's very, very important. You can use one as the control and use the other as an experiment and test the difference depending on what you're doing.
Designed all of our software so that we don't actually need to be in kind of the typical control room that you might imagine kind of at NASA, mission control room where you've got lots of different computers. We have a web-based software that we use for operations.
A previous role of mine in Air Force was a flying maritime patrol aircraft, and we used to surveil large areas of ocean and look for any ships within that area of ocean. So what the M2 satellite will be testing for potential future capability is looking at the whole Earth and being able to detect a large number of ships in a much smaller amount of time than an aircraft can. And what that does for us is it allows aircraft to focus on more important missions and cut down time and focus on a particular area if we need to. This is really a pivotal moment for space in Australia, and what a project such as M2 does is it allows industry to grow, it allows academia to grow, to the point that when defence needs a large space-based project, there's an industry base that's there ready to go with the experience needed to build these large and complex missions.
It's an amazing part of our space program because it's really demonstrating our sovereign capability, Australia's capability to build those satellites and then test them in space. So it's all about being able to test our surveillance capabilities from the ground, but also the fact that we built these satellites in Australia, launched them, and are now controlling them from Australia.
Welcome to tonight's Q&A panel, M2 from inception to launch. I'd like to start by showing my respects and acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land, the elders past and present on which this meeting takes place. Tonight we're going to hear all about the M2 CubeSat mission, and we've got a wonderful panel to take us on that journey from inception through to launch. So I'd like to introduce who we have tonight. Firstly, we have Professor Russell Boyce. Next we have Josh Fitzmaurice, Dr. Courtney Bright, and Andrin Tomaszek. Hopefully you've just seen all of these people on that wonderful video at the start. The M2 mission, as we have just seen, is one of the most complex small satellite missions that Australia's ever launched. In fact, the world's maybe ever launched. Russell, you started all of this, and it's grown from a small thing to a very, very big thing over the years. So I thought it would maybe be good to start with you, zoom out a bit and give us a bird's eye view about where we came from and how we got to here.
Thanks, Melrose. Yes, it's been about 6 or 7 years now. A very, very small number of us came down from Queensland, actually, and you were one of them, Melrose. We were challenged by the university to establish a space program, a university-based space program. There was nothing like that in the country at the time. We were challenged to come up with an approach to research, an approach to education that would be building capacity in this country for doing space. We were challenged to flow that into the education that we were providing. University money, and then money from the Royal Australian Air Force, which has totaled about $30 million to date, combined investment by the two organisations. We've done some brain drain reversing. We built a fabulous team, which about a year or so ago peaked at about 50 people. and we started doing space missions to do research in orbit, space missions to build the sort of capability that you only get by tackling the hard things, making the mistakes and trying again. We've flowed that into the education, and we've seen along the way a lot of things have changed in this country. We've seen the Australian Space Agency born, and we're very, very proud that we've actually played a significant role in bringing that about.
That is an excellent summary, and you raised some really, really good points there. So I'll maybe turn to Josh. As we just heard from Russell, RAF have been a really strong supporter of our journey, and you've been with us through a significant portion of that journey. So I'd like to ask you, what does M2 and the program mean to you, and why didn't you just simply procure a space asset off the shelf from a vendor?
Sure. So absolutely, it has been a journey, and Air Force's journey began back in around 2017 with UNSW, and throughout the time through to now and continuing, really our focus has been on people. And so I think there were really two major aims back in 2017 when we started the program with UNSW, and those aims remain, being risk reduction for capability within defence, with some of the large capital acquisition space programs coming down the line. But really the primary focus for us has been on education. And as I said, that's really to grow the people within defence and within defence industry. And space workforce has been and continues to be a really big focus for defence. Knowing what's coming down the pipeline, some really big space programs in their inception at the moment, people are going to be key to that capability, and what we've managed to grow through our cooperation with UNSW is some really fabulous education here at the Australian Defence Force Academy that has seen a really large throughput of both defence and civilian attendance. And I guess as an example that I see in the office today, we've got some people from the Chief Information Officer group working for us, so IT background, but doing the Space Masters here has allowed them to come into a space capability program and really enhance their input using that IT background, but also being able to communicate about space. And that's just one small example, I guess, of how by growing our people, it really enhances space capability for defence.
Excellent. I would maybe reflect on that as well, because I'm largely in charge of trying to make our Space Masters program work. Having this program means we've had that connection with you, and we have those conversations, and some of them are quite formal conversations where we, sit around the meeting table and there's an agenda and, what should we do? But a lot of the value that we try to develop comes from those informal conversations, comes from having that shared purpose of, we're trying to deliver something into orbit. It's a real focal point, and I think it's been, certainly for me, one of the main drivers for helping to shape and tailor that education program forward. So yeah, it's been very, very valuable for me personally. Andrew and Courtney, I'll maybe turn to both of you at the same time there. We heard about this program of missions that we've had. So the focus of tonight is about M2 specifically, because that's the kind of jewel in the crown of the series of missions we've had. But I'm interested to hear from you what the value of having a program of missions means compared to having kind of back-to-back one-offs. What has it meant for us in terms of being able to grow and deliver things that we wouldn't have been able to do just with single one-off missions? I'll maybe start with Andrew.
Okay, fully loaded question, but yeah, it's been fantastic to have a program like this. It is very important to distinguish the back-to-back one-offs versus having a longer-term program. And I think M2 has been a longer-term program where we've had some stepping stones along the way, starting small, building a team, and then starting to attempt more and more with our capability demonstrations with the spacecraft. And so that is important in terms of getting the skill sets in to UNSW to be able to then learn how to do the design, the development, and really achieve the missions that yourself are asking for. But obviously we're seeing people transition in and out of the team as well. Like Russ said, the team kind of tends to expand a little bit and shrink. And so having a longer term program allows us to be more resilient through those times, but also equally showcase more of what we can do with these spacecraft, because every time we sort of build on the previous knowledge base, previous products and that we've delivered, and then going the next level and the next level. And M2 is definitely one of these where now we've kind of got further down the track with our missions, and it's something that is very, very complex. Not only is it something that we've put together based on your needs, but it's also resulted in other collaborations domestically, internationally. We've built a supply chain around that. We've got different manufacturers, a lot of them Australian as well, which is very important. But all of that is required for a longer term program, and sustaining that is really, really important and gives us the cutting edge as well to make sure we can deliver these missions every time. Piecemeal is a little bit more difficult, having to chop and change.
So, Courtney, you've been with us for quite a long time now. So even before the RAF-funded missions, you came on board towards the end of BRMM, I guess, sort of halfway through.
Yeah, toward the end of the program. So my first day on the job was BRMM launch day.
Yeah.
It was an exciting first day or first evening. I think we started at 10 p.m. at night for launch. I guess further to Andrew's response, it's been quite helpful having the series of missions, because from each one, we didn't start too basic, but we still built on capability each time, but we were able to learn a lot from each mission. We learned what we did well, what we didn't do so well, and improved that the next time, and each time it's just been a big step up to the point that M2 is by far the most complex mission we've done, but it's also going very, very smoothly based on what we've learned from the previous missions and what we've been able to apply.
Yeah, certainly. I remember the BRMM launch quite well. We had a few launch parties. There was quite a lot of pizza consumed over a period of, I don't know, about 3 or 4 nights before it went off. But that was a very kind of hectic period. One of the things that I think that the program gives is that ability to take some hits and rebound from it. So, you know, some of the best lessons you learn are sometimes the hardest that you learn. So before we really get into the guts of what M2 is all about, I thought we should maybe reflect on M1. So the program was a series of missions, and it started with M1. And I see Andren's itching to tell us the story of M1. So what was it, and what happened?
Well, I was going to add to that. Actually, I think that was the first day that I started here, was the launch of M1.
Okay.
Yep. So I think that was actually a 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. start for that launch. But I just joined the team. It was closer to the bigger group that Russ mentioned. There was a lot of excitement to have that spacecraft go up. It was the beginning of the program that M2 is a part of. But unfortunately, that spacecraft, for whatever reason, we could not make contact with it. There were large efforts expended to do that. But that was something that we had to learn from and go right back into the design, the development, our skill sets, and see what went wrong with that mission to improve what we're doing today. And I think that's been a fundamental part of the success of M2. We've really taken that on board. We've really learned from what happened there on different aspects. But I think one key aspect here as well is the UNSW Canberra Space team, if you'd like. The culture coming into that group and seeing something like that defeat, you know, the excited faces, if you like, didn't deter any of them to keep going, didn't deter any of them to investigate, to come together to really make the best of it.
Yeah, I'll maybe throw to Russ now, because I'm sure you've got lots to say on this. But you know, thinking back, you know, we'd come off the back of BRMM, which, you know, there's a lot of things to learn during that program as well. It certainly wasn't smooth sailing at 100% at the time, but it was a pretty big success. So, you know, this program of a series of missions were planned, and there was going to be this stepping stone approach. So, you know, What was it like for you when all of that process happened?
We came out of the Buccaneer program. We've mentioned Bucky or BRMM Buccaneer. That was the first mission. We procured the spacecraft for that mission, and then we did a lot of value adding to it. And that process gave us confidence, and in fact showed us the need to be able to build these systems ourselves and not rely on black box systems that didn't necessarily work. And so the M1 mission was our first go at that. We had the self-belief that we could design and build a spacecraft, and even though it was small, it was more or less the same size as this one on the table here. Nevertheless, it's still a complete satellite, a very, very complicated one. And we got that into orbit, and we were never able to talk to it. As Andrew said, that was really, really a kick in the head at first. But it led to soul searching. It led to soul searching by myself and on the part of the whole team. What could we have done better? What could it have been that we did wrong? And nobody knew. There were a few possibilities. But as a team, and I got to watch the team do this, as a team, we dug really, really deep and tried to understand what were the different possibilities. And every single member of the team looked at their own efforts and thought, okay, don't know if I screwed up, but what could I have done to do it better, and what will I do better next time? And as a team, everybody lifted. We were able, working with Air Force and also working with colleagues from Shoal Group, whom we invited in to help us do the deep dive, we were able to propose another mission before M2, and that's the mission that you can see on the table here. And we were able to proceed into that very, very quickly and to start kicking some goals. But that M1 experience, it was very hard. It was very, very hard emotionally for the team, but the growing culture handled it extremely well. One of the most defining moments for me of the whole M1 experience was standing at Avalon Air Show, talking with the person that many of the viewers would know affectionately as Macca. Macca was Deputy Chief of the Air Force. He retired last year as Chief of Joint Capability, but he was our sponsor, our patron for these missions. And Macca said to me, Russ, this is great, this is fantastic that M1 has failed, because you are going to make mistakes. And it's better to make it now and learn from it before you get to the more important, more complex missions later. That was a vote of confidence, but also an expression of the reality. You do something really hard, you're going to come up with roadblocks. You're going to stumble and occasionally fall. You've got to pick yourself up and keep going. And it's through that again and again and again that you build the capability, the wisdom, the street smart.
So I'll maybe turn to Courtney, and I hope I'm not kind of ripping the plaster off here, but you know, once the satellite goes up, it's largely in your hands, right? So M1's launched. There was, I can't remember how many satellites were on that ride share, but there was a lot. Right?
64.
So a lot of satellites got spat out, and we're trying to figure out whether, like, we're trying to communicate with our satellite. We don't really know which one it is. And every day people are coming in, how's it going, Courtney? Have we heard from it yet? So, you know, it wasn't just this line in the sand of, yeah, we've definitely lost the spacecraft. It was a long process. So what were your experiences and reflections on that process?
Yeah, it was a tough period. So yeah, obviously you have kind of, you know, we've done all the rehearsals and so on for the launch and early orbit phase, where first we try and establish contact and check that the spacecraft is okay, and that's, you know, the highest risk part of any mission. And we have different pointing strategies that we attempt if we're not able to make contact the first time, because there's a lot of uncertainty on where it's going to be in the orbit, where you need to point your antennas. And, you know, we always have the, I guess, emotional build-up before, you know, before the ground station pass comes up, where we're waiting to see a beacon from the satellite. And then it doesn't happen, and then you're kind of disappointed, and then we've got an idea of what might be wrong, and so we change something accordingly, and we get excited for the next pass, and then it doesn't happen. And, you know, the weeks kind of go by, and we're very rigorously trying to eliminate what The problem could be in documenting all the things that we've tried and doing statistical analysis to make sure that we definitely would have, for example, one of the things that we were trying was sweeping the frequency that we were talking to the spacecraft with. But because we had 64 different satellites that are rapidly spreading out over the orbit and they hadn't all been identified yet, we're having to try that strategy on each of those spacecraft or each of the unidentified ones, which meant a really massive search space. So we're having to document, you know, have we tried this on all of them? Have we tried different combinations of things on all of them? And each time somebody's got a new idea of what it might be, we kind of get excited again and nothing comes of it. And then this kind of went on for a few months, and then we kind of ended up having a conversation at this point, which I think we'll talk about later. M2 Pathfinder had been funded as risk mitigation for M2 once we'd had the M1 failure. And at that point, eventually we kind of had to say the time that we're now spending on this is we're no longer getting the payoff. We've eliminated the main things that it could be, and we kind of need to pull the plug. And, you know, maybe there's something else we could have tried that would mean we'd find it, but it was kind of, we're clutching at straws and we had to say we're better off putting our time into the next mission.
So it sounds like a very rigorous, detailed, but also quite stressful process as well. Yeah. Do you think our ability to operate and fault find, was it improved through that process, or did it just shine a spotlight on what we already had?
No, it definitely improved, and I think a big thing was making sure that we are documenting everything that we're doing, because then I think it would become very easy from a personal point of view as well to be like, oh, let's try this now, not realizing, and then kind of trying the same things over and over again, which ends up being a waste of time if you haven't been really quite rigorous in writing down exactly what you're doing. So I think we did quite well there, and that was a process we kind of had to keep forcing ourselves to do during the process whenever everybody kind of got a bit too excited or a bit too hopeful, and then we'll kind of bring it back to make sure we're following a process here, as well as managing the expectations of the team, like having people come around to my office kind of multiple times a day. Did we hear from it this time? And no, I'm sorry. I'm assure you I'll let you know if we do. Yeah.
Excellent. So Josh, we'll maybe segue into Pathfinder with this question, but you know, what was it like from your side of the fence? I guess you were possibly one of the people continually asking Courtney, have we heard from it yet? You know, what was that like from your side? And then if you can link into what was the process for M2 Pathfinder to become a thing?
Yeah, certainly. So I think I mentioned earlier, one of the big goals that we were hoping to get out of this program was risk reduction. And when I talk risk reduction, it's really gaining lessons in the development of space capability. And so my manager in defence is a US Lieutenant Colonel with a wealth of space experience, and she'll be the first person to tell you that space is hard. And I think that's just so true. Space is such a different capability than many other areas that we have a lot of experience in with defence, and what we've managed to do with this program, I think, is certainly from our side of the fence for M1, seeing the passion and the energy that had gone into M1. It certainly was gut wrenching from our side as well, and I think in saying that, one of the things that I have absolutely loved about this program is working with people like Andrew and Courtney, and you're just seeing that absolute rigour that's gone into, we then won the fault finding investigation. It was certainly observed that every single stone was overturned multiple times, and literally everything that could be done in terms of investigating what happened with M1 was done, and so many lessons came out of that I think they aren't lost. M1 for us has proved a really valuable lesson in terms of what we can take forward into complex defence satellite programs, and in terms of the rigour that's been applied subsequently to Pathfinder and M2. Although you can look at this thing sitting right here on the table in front of us and think it's a cute little box, the same amount of rigour needs to go into this type of satellite design and construction as does the $1 billion bus-sized satellites out in geosynchronous orbit. And so I think that alone is a huge lesson for defence, that no matter the complexity of satellite, the same amount of rigour through the complete life cycle from conception, design, build, launch and operations, that rigour needs to be there the whole way. And I think that's, in terms of risk reduction, has been a hugely valuable lesson for us. And Pathfinder was critical to that as well. Following on from M1, getting Pathfinder up in space, proving some of the subsystems, and also a win, I think, for the UNSW team, having something up there, communicating with it, learning the lessons. It was invaluable to then go on with the more complex M2 mission.
So yeah, I mean, I think an important outcome from or goal for M1 and also M2 Pathfinder was to try and do these things quickly. So it was 12 months, get it, put it on orbit and operate it. So M1 didn't, wasn't successful, and then M2 Pathfinder came along. But whose idea was it to do M2 Pathfinder? Who first came to you with the idea of Pathfinder, or was it from RAF requesting to us?
So if memory serves me, I think, Russ, it was a proposal that came through from you, and I think we really, from that stage, as Courtney mentioned, the investigations into M1 were ongoing, but the longer it went on, there was that feeling of, we need to be moving and focusing on M2 and preparing for that, and that's where from yourself, Russ, the proposal and idea for a quick, rapid risk reduction mission that would lower the risk for M2 and increase the experience within the team came forward. And I think from there it was really quite rapid in terms of the back and forth, figuring out exactly what we needed out of that mission, and it was turned around really impressively quickly, I think, in terms of from the idea in terms of what you see in front of us and what's now up in space. And Courtney talks to you regularly.
Our understanding is that it's the second fastest CubeSat, or in fact the second fastest satellite that's ever been developed from conception to ready for launch. 10 months that process took. The only faster one out there, to our knowledge, is one that Planet, the billion-dollar startup with hundreds of CubeSats in orbit, they've managed to do it faster. But this was a phenomenal effort. Perhaps Andrew, you should be commenting on that, because you had the excruciating task and pleasure, I guess, of leading that.
It was a challenge, to put it that way. But look, this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning in terms of programs as well. So when this concept was born and we said, yep, let's go put it on orbit for the purpose of de-risking, one, that means you want to fly some systems, the platform that you're going to be launching for the future spacecraft, which was M2 in this case, but also largely built on M1. So there's a lot of things that the team had developed that was already available, and there was a lot of knowledge in the team. They've just delivered their first, another 3D CubeSat. And so to leverage, one, the skill sets, the experience, and also the products that we had, the facilities, just meant that the job was a lot easier. So it was challenging to try and do everything in that time frame. But again, it's part of the teamwork. We have great facilities here out at Mount Stromlo as well to do the qualification activities, so there's not much time spent in traveling. But yeah, it was a phenomenal effort by the team to do that.
The important thing for me, the lesson that I learned from that, despite the very sporty time frame, the emphasis on testing was there. One of our lessons learnt from M1, don't be sloppy with how much testing you do. Explore all of the possibilities, the corner cases, and test. And we did that. Yeah,
we may cover it later on, but one of the very important things that we learnt out of M1 as well, and the reason we led down the path of a lot of test and putting that rigor really behind these systems, as you mentioned, was that for the CubeSat industry, because it's such a lower threshold to get into in terms of monies, we did find that a lot of third-party systems and just what's available on the market is not really plug and play, and it's not really up to aerospace standard, if you would like. And so that meant when we received all of these components, especially from third parties, it meant really pulling it apart, doing receipt inspections, and making sure that we felt it was robust, clean, and fit enough for the purpose for your mission. And that was already a de-risk exercise in the program without actually putting anything on orbit. So I think that was something that we really took away from that.
And for me, it's certainly been a real pleasure sitting through. I joined the program just before M1, so wasn't involved in a lot of the lead up to that mission, but certainly you're seeing some of the products from M1 and then into M2 Pathfinder and then M2. It's been such a pleasure seeing that process grow in terms of the testing cycles and really the rigor that's gone into it. And definitely that's something Defence we will take away for future satellite programs. Yeah, I think for me, M2 Pathfinder, it was really a coming of age in many ways. So, you know, the M1, it was, you know, one of the kind of lower tier F1 teams, and and how this came together was, you know, what you would expect from your, you know, Ferraris or Red Bulls or whoever's winning races these days. And I think it was also a really good a demonstration of that relationship between RAF and us as well, because you know, it's quite a bold move to say, yeah, we've lost that first satellite, can we have another one, please? I mean, it's and if we didn't have that strong relationship, and if the whole team wasn't you know, really focused on delivering value for RAF, then I don't think that it might have played out the way it did. But you know, it's small and it doesn't look quite as exciting as M2, but I think the surety and the ability for us to push on and do something like M2 was really nailed down by this little satellite. So before we move on to M2, I'll maybe just get Courtney to give your insights about when this launched, what happened that night off the back of M1.
Yeah. So I guess stepping back a bit, just emphasising something Russ said before, a massive change that we made between M1 and M2 Pathfinder was reviewing our test processes. So in, I guess, going between, you know, cubesats and kind of big bus size missions, there'll be, you know, a lot of international standards and so on that you follow for testing the large missions. And then I guess there's a scale somewhere where you don't have the resources and the schedule for a CubeSat to, I guess, follow that kind of amount of documentation and testing timelines and have the same testing resources. But, you know, trying to find the sweet spot on that spectrum. And I think we were too far, you know, lacking rigor for M1. And we, I think, found the sweet spot for M2 Pathfinder. The biggest thing was that we went for kind of like a test as you fly approach, where we did all of the testing over the air as though the spacecraft was in space, even though it was in the clean room. We were able to find a lot of issues there that we wouldn't have found otherwise, and that made a huge difference, I think, in our confidence that we were going to be able to talk to M2 Pathfinder when it launched. Despite that, and even though we really felt as though we couldn't have done any more with the time we had and the testing that we did, it was still a really nervous limbo period in the lead up to the Pathfinder launch, because, you know, what if we'd missed something? What if something happens that we have no control over? And at this point, we really felt like, you know, the future of the team was on the line, our jobs are on the line, because, you know, if we'd had a second failure in the row, our chances of getting more funding were going to be pretty slim, I think. So there was a lot riding on it, and at the same time, then we kept having all these launch delays because of COVID, and they were often quite last minute. So we're launching in a couple of weeks. Oh no, it's going to be another couple more months, and so we kept having this, you know, lead up and then need to wait again and so on. And yeah, so then the actual launch day came up. The first day, I think we had like a 2-hour launch window, and we kind of kept. It was really windy in New Zealand. It was launching with Rocket Lab from New Zealand, and we'd kind of have the countdown, and then it would finally get to a couple of minutes to go, and then they'd pause it and say, no, the wind's picked up too much, we need to wait again. And then that kept happening, and finally there was only like 10 minutes left in the window, so they're going to have another crack. And I think we got down to a minute or something from just over a minute before liftoff, and they finally called it and said, no, it's too windy. So then we're kind of, just been this really tense couple of hours waiting for it to go up, and then it didn't. And then I think it was another few days before the wind had died down enough to have another attempt. And then it went up quite quickly, I think, within the first few minutes of the window. And the first few passes it took, so over our ground station out in Yass, we had we're going to have 2 passes quite quickly after the launch, and then we've got 12 hours before the next 2 roll around. Initially, you're doing all of your orbit propagation, figuring out where your ground station needs to point based on some early estimates, and you don't get an update with what the real values are until a few hours after the launch. So for the first couple of passes, we were going on those really early estimates, and we didn't make contact for the first couple of passes. And we're telling ourselves and telling the team that we're not really expecting to find it on the first pass because we've got a lot of uncertainties, and here are all the things that could be explanations why we don't make contact on the first pass. But at the same time, it would have been really quite nice to get contact straight away. So yeah, there was a lot going through my head, as well as I think, particularly the operations team and the ground segment team. I remember Russ asking me on the day of the launch, am I excited? And I kind of had to say yes and no, because I'm kind of having to manage my excitement because I need to be in, I guess, a problem-solving mindset, kind of like a resilient mindset, because we might need to go through the same process of M2, and I don't want to have kind of this big emotional plunge where I'm expecting it to be awesome, and then we need to go back into that problem-solving mindset. So I was trying to kind of stay there anyway, and so it was still a bit unfortunate when we didn't make contact straight away, and we're kind of already going into that mode. And then, yeah, so 12 hours later, I think the next pass was at 4 a.m. our time, and we decided not to get up for that one. So we have all the passes pre-scheduled, so we don't have interaction during the pass. Got up at, I think, 5:30 or so, checked what happened, still no responses. The next one, and we had everyone kind of joining in on Zoom or Teams, whatever it was at the time, because we were still in just coming out in COVID lockdown, so we weren't all able to be in a room together. So I'm sharing kind of the ground station logs. And then finally, toward the end of the pass, we got a beacon from it, and it was just a massive relief. And at first it was kind of, let's not get too excited. Let's, check the data, make sure it's definitely M2 Pathfinder. It's not, we haven't heard from something else, or it's not, our test satellite that's out at Yass near the ground station. Checking all the data made sense before we kind of made an official announcement to the team and kind of let ourselves relax. But yeah, so that was really good. It was really exciting when we realized it was Pathfinder, and a massive relief and a win for the team.
So we'll maybe move on to M2 now. So Russell, we've proved that we can do it. We've developed pretty much all of that hardware, and most of the software ourselves. Operations have gone well, and it's now time for the main event, M2. So could you tell us what M2 actually does? So what's the mission that it's going to perform, and how does all of this pretty out there technology feed into that mission goal?
I guess firstly, that satellite there is a 3-unit CubeSat. The thing that's in orbit at the moment that we call M2 is a 12-unit CubeSat, so it's much bigger. And in the coming weeks, we'll split it into 2, a moment that we affectionately call the divorce, and we'll fly it as 2 6U CubeSats. So 2 CubeSats, twice the size of that, flying in formation with each other. That's already a seriously complicated mission. What if we crash them into each other? What if we don't understand the quite complicated aerodynamics of these things in low Earth orbit, where it's not a vacuum? There is some air up there, and therefore there's lift and drag, and these things move around quite a lot. We're going to be using that to control the separation and the way these 2 spacecraft behave relative to each other. So that's a very, very big deal right there. But on board each of those 2 halves of M2, there is a very sophisticated telescope with an extremely high resolution sensor behind it that produces so much data that we can't get the data off. So therefore we have to do onboard processing. That's the next big major deal about these spacecraft, and we're doing it on, we've set up the 2 spacecraft to be able to do it on both. We've got other optical systems on board, some of which we've developed here in-house. We're going to be speaking from one spacecraft to the other. We're going to be sending photons with a laser from one spacecraft to the other. We're going to be doing science experiments on board. Very, very excitingly, and some of the listeners or viewers would have potentially seen a LinkedIn post the other day, we'll be demonstrating in-orbit artificial intelligence. So not just onboard processing, but actually applying machine learning algorithms to extract useful information from the enormous amount of data that will be produced by the systems on board. We were able to successfully demonstrate the AI environment just recently, and as best we can determine, in fact we're very confident, it's the first time any Australian group or spacecraft has demonstrated in-orbit artificial intelligence, and it's one of the first in the world ever. And we'll be really, really taking that forward over the coming months. It's a very complicated mission. It's a tech demo sat, or a pair of tech demo sats. It's a research program. It's endless opportunity for lessons learned. We've packed so much into these spacecraft that it's like a it's like a visit to Bunnings.
With the nearest space aisle.
Exactly. Yeah, you're in the space aisle at Bunnings. Oh, I like that. I'd like to do, if I combine that with that, what can we do today? That's how this mission has the potential to unfold over the next 6 months, 12 months, couple of years. It's simply stunning. Therefore, it caused a lot of pain to the team to develop it. I'm guilty for inflicting some of that pain. I'll leave it to the team to say how painful it was.
Just about to kind of reflect on that. How does that make you feel when you know you've got a professor in a spacecraft Bunnings going, oh, I have 1 of that and 2 of those and 3 of those. So yep. Both of you have to kind of make this all happen. So how does that work?
So one other thing that I wanted to mention on top of that is these spacecraft are platforms, and they're largely reprogrammable in the sense that we can recode what they do on orbit and how items 1, 3, 4 go together to make up a mission objective. In that comes complexity. So what Russ mentioned, they are 6U CubeSats, so they're very small, and we've jam-packed them to the brim with our own technologies that have been leveraged from Pathfinder, from M1. But equally, there's also collaborations there with other parties, and we hosted their platforms, their payloads on the spacecraft as well. That leads to many, many interfaces, and a professor with some very high-level optimum goals, if you want, of creative things we can do on orbit and really, really fancy things that then you need to kind of untie this concept and try and feed to your engineering team to be able to say, right, actually he wants the radio to speak with this part of the spacecraft to do that, which is, I guess, the fun also that comes with the work that we're doing, working on a full system from the development then to the operations side to hand that system to Courtney to reap the benefits of that data that's being collected, to bring it all together and bring that back on ground. I don't know what your experience is with all of this, noting the operations side and making sure that everything actually fits together at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the rewarding parts of this role is, I guess, interfacing between the research team and Ross and the engineering team to try and figure out, okay, well, this is what we got. What we've got, this is what the researchers are wanting us to do. How do we make that work? Often like you'll kind of need to find a happy medium. One example recently was Ross was pretty keen to do something elaborate before we split the 2 spacecraft, and there were just engineering constraints that made that not possible. And so we had a meeting for about an hour going through what those constraints might be. But then, as a team, we were able to figure out, okay, but we can't do that before the divorce. So what can we do though that starts, getting us a large part of the way there?
But they go hand in hand. From the engineering perspective, to be able to achieve that, to make the system work, but also to make sure that we get the science outcomes and the education outcomes that you're working on, Melrose, to then feed back to defence. It's a very, very important symbiotic relationship if you want to make sure that happens.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say from my perspective, my research is mainly around space domain awareness, and I think having Australian satellites up there, complex ones that are flying in formation, is no longer a theoretical thing that Australia needs to do. Like, we need to up our game in across that whole space domain piece, and actually having things in space that you care about is a major driver to make that happen. So Josh, the view from your side of the fence on what M2 enables you to do, but also helps to drive forward other activity. What do you see that's been?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, I think similar to Russ, it's almost a matter of tempering what we want to do with M2. And so when we see, on a computer screen, on a piece of paper in front of us, the list of things that M2 is able to do, and you're having the discussions with Andrew and Courtney about, what are the priorities for this mission? What are we focusing on? It's just, well, all of it. Let's do all of it. And it's been great having that, open discussion about what the priorities are, not only for defence but also on the research side for UNSW, and balancing those priorities. And I think that's a really valuable lesson as well, because certainly in defence, space is a rapidly changing field. Your focus areas and priorities are continually changing, and so for us, month to month, what the priority for us is might change. And I think, as Andrew mentioned, having a software-defined radio on the M2 satellites really makes it exciting in terms of being able to shift that focus and priority area of, what is the focus for the next couple of months? What does defence really want to get out of this? Albeit tempering that with the realities of the engineering cycles and what can be achieved within any certain time period, and not getting too carried away with trying to do everything possible with this satellite, because it really is a complex thing.
There are constraints with M2. It's not the perfect satellite, and our capacity to create the software to turn it into this option in the Bunnings Space Isle as opposed to that one, it takes time to develop things. But one of the really, really cool things about M2, we've demonstrated getting a very agile and capable piece of hardware and software on orbit, and it's sitting there waiting for us to decide what is the mission. I mean, we know what the mission is, but if we chose to, we could quickly develop a new piece of software, and we could upload it, reboot it, and change the purpose of the whole mission literally overnight. And that's an amazing capability.
I think that speaks to the level of complexity, the diversity of sensors we've got on it, and also our ability to control it on orbit as well. So, if you take each one of those sensors individually, you could launch that on a satellite, and it could do an operational role, and it could do a really good version of that. But it's a tech demonstrator, and I think a lot of the value we can get from that mission is, proving out each of those individual systems, which is, that phase we're in just now. But then looking to move into how can we use combinations of these sensors together in new and intelligent ways. And that's when, I think the real gold for this mission will be is when we start to see, these two very capable spacecraft working in tandem with each other. So, Courtney, I'll maybe turn to you. So it's largely your role, and also, I guess it's everyone's role, but you're one of the chief cat herders to get us from these crazy ideas about using multiple sensors and just doing all of this awesomeness. That has to flow through the operations cycle. You've got to try and do it, as efficiently as possible to get us into the ballpark where that sort of complex mission can happen. How does that process take place, planning wise, and also, maybe tempering a desires? What does that look like for you?
Yep. So before we launch, we get in place, I guess, a fairly detailed plan for what we're going to do with the spacecraft from, when it's launched until it's commissioned. So that'll be testing out all the subsystems on board. We've kind of got two phases of commissioning for M2. We have the pre-divorce commissioning phase, and then the post-divorce commissioning phase, because there are certain things that we can't actually do until we do divorce them. It's very power limited while the two spacecraft are conjoined, because on the conjoined face there's a whole massive amount of solar panels that are not exposed, and because we're going to there are several panels that we can deploy, but we're keeping them all kind of tucked away until after we've divorced, because we're going to use the panel deployments to help us with the formation flying, so to stabilize the formation after we've split them apart. So then we have a whole nother round of commissioning after that. We've found it, and this is something we learned from our previous missions, really important to have those early phases kind of not completely set in stone. There are processes we can go through to update what our plan is, but because as soon as it's up in space, everybody's got ideas, and you need to be able to make sure that we don't kind of derail the mission. And we've always got, a plan to fall back on and point back to. So for M2, we wanted to get to the point of divorcing as quickly as possible, partly because that's a really big milestone for us, but also because we are quite operationally limited while they're conjoined for power reasons, thermal reasons, and whatnot. After that, so the next step is going to be we need to recommission the attitude control system once they're separated, because we've got one bigger spacecraft that's now into two, and they've got totally different inertia and mass properties. Recalibrate the sensors. At that point, we start opening up, getting ready to do the bigger things where we combine multiple sensors. So we're looking at combining the high resolution imaging system Ross was talking about before with the GPU, which has artificial intelligence algorithms on it, which can take the image from the images from the sensor and process that on board, looking at having it automatically tell us when a ship is detected in an image, and then we can decide that, okay, well, we'll downlink that image, because we can't downlink all of the images that it has on board. We just don't have the contact time and the data rate for that. Also looking at commissioning the SDR, with the software-defined radio, which can also pick up the identity tags, I guess, from the ships. Yeah. Oh, AIS, yep. So at that point, I guess we've got three independent subsystems. We need to, I guess, first check that they all work independently, and at that point also checking the interfaces between them, and we can send data through them all between each other, and that will take kind of multiple steps, multiple software updates. Yeah.
Cool. It is a highly complex process, and I think we've got to a point of kind of flexible rigor. I think, a lot of things do change because they either have to, because life gets in the way, or there's strategic reasons for doing that. So Andrew, what is your view on how to herd all of those cats, and you're responsible for the whole system design. So what's it like for you having to juggle all of those balls, and how do you make decisions, and how do you think the best process to make a decision in that very agile environment looks like?
Okay. So it does start with the conversation with Air Force, and then from the academic side, for example, with Russ and Melrose yourself, to try and work out what is kind of the big picture. What do you want to get out of this? And then, yes, I do try to interpret those in engineering terms to put them on paper so that they become some type of requirements that I can take back to the team. But decisions are made by really relying on the people that we have in the team. I really, really rely on their input, the way they present their information, put detail behind it, or analyze certain aspects, and then come up and say, well, if we do this, this doesn't look so sensible, but maybe if we do something along these lines, I can do that, or that might be a better way. So it is, for me, a very entangled bit of well, there's knots and all sorts of stuff everywhere. And it's just trying to navigate that constantly and trying to work out, well, where are the roadblocks for one to try and clear those. Listening to the people in the team, seeing what their strengths are, their skill sets, and then tasking them to start working on those requirements. And so that kind of flows down to say, well, this is what I want to achieve. How does this look? Listening to the broader team, and then saying, well, all right, we need to make some adjustments. And I think it's really that process that's required, and it doesn't just happen once. It's just this continual process of refining the solution until we get to something that we sort of all agree is doable. And equally, Air Force has played an important part in that, in helping us continue going through those conversations multiple times, coming back to you and saying, well, this didn't work so well, you know, what about if we try this? And as a team, everyone usually tries to come back with a recommendation. They will always say, no, this is not possible because, and I recommend this. And I think that's really, really a strength that we've got now with our experience, to come back to yourself, but also the academic team, to say how else you could achieve something. And then, yeah, we sort of ping pong back, if you like, until we get a system that's refined, go through the testing, launch it on orbit, and then continue with the mission operations.
So it's really interesting you talk about the team there and the people. So often when we think about these complex technical systems, it's all, you know, like hard maths or, you know, computer programming code or bits of metal, but it is a team, and it is people that make that happen. And I know, Russell, you have focused very strongly on the team aspects of what this capability is, and you've put a lot of time and effort, and also money in many respects, in helping to grow the team in number, but also grow the team in strength and their ability to understand themselves and each other. So I thought I'd maybe give you the floor for a little while to give us your philosophy on how to grow that team, and maybe what's worked well.
Well, this could take a while, Maris. There's a famous saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's very, very true. If we don't have a team culture that is very, very strong, where people are communicating properly to each other, where people are honest, where people feel safe with each other, where people share the common vision, we know where we're heading, we know why we're doing what we're doing. If we don't have all of that, then it doesn't matter how good we are at the technical things. When things get difficult, inevitably things will just fall apart, and we'll unravel. So yes, we've over the years we've put a lot of effort into people. We've put a lot of effort, particularly into well, shout out to Daryl if Daryl's listening. A very, very fine coach and mentor for many of us in the team. We've spent a lot of time trying to understand our team processes, the way we interact with each other. What does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be emotionally intelligent? How to take hard decisions, how to deal with difficult problems. Doesn't mean that we're necessarily fantastic at it, but we've shown again and again over the last few years, as the challenges have come, we've been able to deal with things and get better and better at it. I don't mind saying, because I'm incredibly proud of the team for this, it was a little over a year ago, and we were facing having to lose a lot of people in the team because of having lost a major contract, which was where we thought things were going to go for the future. And instead of the team kind of withdrawing from each other and saying, okay, well, you got to keep me, get rid of that person, but you got to keep me. That didn't happen at all. And instead the team got together and came up with a proposal, which they then presented to me. Russ, as a team, this is what we think you should do. There are some capabilities that you need more than others. But as a team, this is our offering to you. There was no selfishness whatsoever, and it absolutely blew me away. It realised just despite the stress, COVID at the time, enormous workload with M2 Pathfinder, worrying about getting M2 over the line down the future and worried about job security, the culture was strong enough to do that was simply stunning. And I'm going to remember that to my dying day, I know for sure. The other thing I try very hard to do is to get out of their way. Find good people and get out of their way. Find good people, equip them, give them the resources, if possible, to do what they need to do, and then don't meddle, don't micromanage. Just provide the vision and guidance, and then trust them. And that's what I try to do. And you know, there's some people here in front of the camera, but there's plenty more off camera who are just amazing at their capabilities and what they're able to do, and they get the job done.
I'll maybe move to a question from our viewers. So from Imogen, which is quite related to what we were just talking about. As a leader, Russ, how were you able to keep up the team's resilience through the period of trying to contact M1? How did you know when to quit, and how did you rebuild the team's energy to move on to the next mission?
Well, that's a good question. I should say firstly that it wasn't just me providing that guidance and leadership. I think many people in the team behave as leaders and provide that leadership to each other and to the team at large. To be honest, probably everybody in the team is contributing in ways like that.
Actually, I'll maybe ask Andrew, how did Russell keep up the team's resilience through the period of trying to contact M1?
I'm just trying to remember the situations, and I think it was, again, back to the team, including Russ, where there was this itch as well to try and work out what went wrong. And so while it was heads down and disappointment that we couldn't make contact, there was also this drive of like, right, we got to get together, we got to work out what's going on here. And I think that was the pick me up as well. The fact that Russ was there to listen to what the team had to say, what may have gone wrong, what we could have done better, and kind of just say, okay, well, how do we learn from that? What other options are there? Do we get Shoal Group involved, for example? It was all very, very constructive, and I think that was based on the people that you've built the team on. That was shown through them, but then equally through yourself. And there was obviously a lot of times where we got together to discuss things, to sort of keep abreast of the situation and make I guess a statement that we're all in it together. That was the main thing. And as long as we had that, we had the purpose, we kept moving along. Now that doesn't quite scratch the itch for many of the sort of space, the people that live and breathe space, if you want, on the mission. So for us, it was important to have a program in place and to have the next mission to move on to. And I think knowing that Pathfinder was born out of all of this just sparked another thing for us to bounce back on and to say, right, I've looked at what I've done. I know how I could do things better. Here's another opportunity. And you'll jump on that a lot more with a lot more rigor than had you not had that experience. And I think, again, for us and some of the other people that made that happen, to bring that to the table, that was just, that's really the pick me up as well.
Can I add? One thing I really remember from that time is there was very much a no blame culture, both within the team and from Russ. So I think quite early on, after we weren't able to contact M1, Russ was very much, believes in the team and, this seems really bad, but actually this is going to be like a turnaround point from us and something that we're going to learn so much from, and really turned it into a positive, which I think allowed us to stay positive about it as well. And the fact that either from Russ or within the team, we could have started pointing fingers at each other or at each other's work, and we absolutely didn't. We were able to stay really objective and work at it as a team without kind of, having to go at each other, and that really said a lot about who we are as a team, I think.
Josh, I'll maybe throw it to you. We'll get into some audience questions shortly after this, but the team aspect is really important, and I think it's fair to say that we've seen you and your team as part of our team along the way, and that's been a real strength for us too. How has the team developed on your side? So you started just before M1, and you've had, you know, people come and go, I guess. What's that been like from your side?
Yeah, I think that's, you know, one of the at times painful, but also one of the fabulous things about life in defence is that, you know, we are given opportunities and cycle through opportunities and get exposure to a lot of different posting cycles. And so for myself, I think I'm now the third person within Air Force working on this program directly. So you have several people behind me that have, you know, taken the experience and knowledge they've learned from this program, and you're now using that in one case in the US, working in the operations centre over there with the US military, and in another case on a PhD in a space-related field. So you know, for defence, it allows the knowledge it's gained to be really multiplied and taken into different areas of defence, which I think is hugely valuable for us, and it shares that knowledge across lots of other people, and certainly within the office, there are lots of really knowledgeable space people that are assisting with this and providing, you know, technical review and recommendations that, again, for us, it's this program has provided the opportunity for that you know, technical experience to grow within our team that I think will really again multiply and go forward as we move into these really complex programs we have coming up.
Excellent. So I think because time is ticking on, we've got a few questions here that I'll focus on. One of them is, I think we'll maybe aim this at Andrin to begin with. Looking beyond systems engineering, what are some of the surprises that pushed your team into new domains, such as space strategy planning, government regulations, space law, media and public affairs, nurturing an educated workforce, etc.?
Yeah, to answer that on some of those, one in particular is the regulations and licensing as well. So it is something that's coming about in Australia, and I think to a certain extent on the other side, they're still working out exactly how to go about certain things. So suddenly you go, all right, the systems engineering takes you to this direction and that's what you're going to do. But then, hey, okay, what do we actually have to satisfy here? And being able to then fit into that framework and liaise with those people to overcome other aspects was equally a challenge. There's a lot of, I think, the same for ourselves, our relationship with Air Force is the understanding always of what's happening on the other side. How do we actually help you achieve this? And so that's actually been a very good opportunity for the team as well to always give back to those organisations as well, regulatory bodies, to educate them on what do we actually want to get out of this process and how can they make it better. Equally with the media and being able to, I guess, put things into perspective there, or being able to share our experiences, also with the sort of defence tag on there, and making sure that we manage those or tread in that domain fairly carefully. That's been a challenge, and again, an opportunity for us to showcase what we do. I'm not sure that there are so many other aspects. So outside the systems engineering, there's a whole bunch of things that I think are always surprises that come with it, with the package if you want. And certain people will take a liking to be able to help out with those things, given their sort of backgrounds and strengths to overcome that as well. And I think that's important, and equally a journey that we've had to be able to get to where we are, to try and navigate those different areas.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
There is a temptation by many organisations in Australia and probably worldwide to regard government and government bureaucracy even as bad as the enemy. Certainly an obstacle. It doesn't need to be like that at all. And we've found over the years, if you build relationship, you know, we've built strong relationship with our partner and stakeholder in Air Force, but also with the various aspects of government who are responsible and mandated by law to ensure that Australia isn't doing silly things. If you build that strong that personal relationship, and you go on that journey together, we learn and we figure out how to provide the information that enables the people in various government departments to also learn and be able to understand the information, and together we converge to the outcome that's needed, so that all the different needs are satisfied. So I guess my point is, there are some gnarly challenges, non-technical challenges, but everything tends to be solved through relationship.
Yeah, and so if you want some specific surprises, defence export control was one. Trying to navigate that and continuing to manage that, but also the involvement, for example, with Rocket Lab as a launch service provider. We've had only really good feedback from organisations that we've reached out because of those relationships. And for myself, they are surprises when they come around, but equally I just look back on the team and see who can provide the expertise. And feedback we've gotten, especially from Rocket Lab as well is, you know, wow, we've got so many other people we launch with and prime customers, and you guys seem to be the fastest with emails to respond to all the different aspects and have your ducks in a row every time. So that's fantastic, and feedback for us as well to know that we're doing the right thing and we can keep building ourselves on that.
I think equally for defence, it's been, you know, a really valuable experience in terms of the surprises that have come along and the relationships that have been formed, and certainly moving forward now, you know, the next time this comes around, we can look back on that past experience and think, okay, this person I need to talk to, and it's there ready to go, and that's just another example of the value of the program.
I think that question also touches on the issue of responsible use of space as well, and it's certainly something we've been talking about quite a lot with M2, because it gives us that opportunity to, you know, a much more capable spacecraft. Most of the time when you launch a CubeSat, it's out there and it just floats about doing whatever it does, and you don't have a huge heap of control over it. With M2, the amount of control we have over it is limited by the physics we've got to play with, but we've certainly taken it on board that the opportunity here is goes beyond just that technical scientific aspect. It's about figuring out, you know, how can we be as responsible as we can be when we turn one spacecraft into two spacecraft. So if we don't tell anyone about it, then and someone sees that happen, it's probably concerning. For example, how do we make sure we don't crash into things in space when you do that? Because you're not operating in a vacuum. And I know we've had lots of good discussions on that, and we've really sought to bring in lots of different partners and use it as an opportunity to get better, but also an opportunity to try and be a little more, well, really try and push the boundary for what a responsible use of space in Australia looks like. So we've got a couple of other interesting questions. One of them is, how are the lessons learned during M1 and M2 integrated back into student learning? I'll maybe turn to Russell, and you know, we've got a few things, existing things and a few things on the cards, so I'll maybe turn this one to you.
So I guess the first thing is that all of those lessons learned have made us better scientists and engineers. We have a much better grasp of the challenges and the surprises and the complexities that come with this hard thing that's called doing space than we had when we started. And that means for those of us involved in actually teaching, no. Yeah, I'll retract the word teaching. Education is about enabling the learning of the learners, and for those of us involved in doing that, we're able to pass on through direct experience so much more, so much deeper with far better insights than you could possibly achieve by just reading a textbook, for example. But we're able to take it further than that. One of the nice things that we've established here at the Australian Defence Force Academy is what we call the Australian National Concurrent Design Facility. It's the only thing of its kind in Australia. It's the sort of facility that most large space agencies and international aerospace primes have at the early stages of designing a space mission and a satellite to make sure that it meets the requirements that the user has and can be afforded and can be achieved on time. We have such a facility. It was something that one of our former team, Doug, our former chief engineer, brought that concept to us from the UK. He had set one up. We established it with the help of the French Space Agency, and it is not just a heavily used asset for many players in Australia to design missions. It's an awesome asset that we have ready for student outcomes. Put the students from different flavours of engineering and non-engineering subjects together in the room with the software and run them through the process of designing a mission that must meet the requirements, both technical or scientific, and budget and schedule, and potentially even attending to issues such as, should we really be doing that in the first place? Is it right to do that mission? So we have opportunities like that to flow the lessons learnt from the missions that we do into the learning. And I guess final point to make, therefore, it's by doing those missions, and not just any old mission, but the really push the boat out missions such as M2, it hones our own skills, and it makes us the best people to be able to work with students and flow on that knowledge. And if we can bring about a situation, and this is where we're aiming for in the future, where the students are immersed with our team, that's the best possible way for them to learn. They'll actually get to learn by doing.
Excellent. Okay, we've got one for Courtney here. How would you encourage young girls to explore working in the space sector as a career? What made you choose this path?
Oh, good question. It certainly wasn't a straight path or one that was obvious to me. So yeah, when I was a kid, I kind of knew I really liked space from when I was quite young. I'd kind of, I think we had some encyclopedias at home that I would, read about the stars and the planets in, and then kind of my mind was a bit blown, so I wanted to find out more about that. I didn't really know how to do that though. I remember, I ended up thinking I liked physics, and so I did that in high school when we got to choose which science subjects, but I was the only girl. I was quite discouraged at the time, so I remember it's in the corridor at some point, and they put up all the different subjects that everybody was doing. And I remember overhearing a group of guys saying, "Oh, physics is really hard, I don't think I could do that." And then someone said, "Courtney's doing it, it can't be that hard." There was a lot of that. And I think when I guess through a few similar experiences, I kind of didn't end up putting in a lot of effort in year 12 because I thought, I don't actually know what I want to do. I like this thing, but it doesn't seem realistic. So yeah, it was not until kind of afterward that, I graduated, wasn't sure what I wanted to do, had some not so good jobs, and then tried to get back and thinking I might try and go to uni, and then found out I could actually do engineering. And then I guess it was quite a long process to figure out that space was a realistic option. And it was not until probably well into my undergraduate degree, which was mechanical engineering, that I realised that was an option, and then I found a PhD project to apply for to try and get experience in space, and then here I am. Yeah, so I guess lessons learned would be, don't let anybody else tell you what you're capable of. If you have a goal and you get laughed at, just ignore them. It's usually probably more about them than it is about you. And yeah, you need to work hard as well to actually realize your potential, and you don't really know what you're capable of until you apply yourself.
Yeah, you've been an invaluable team member throughout all of this. You've done fantastic, sorry. But I think also importantly, you've given back and you've been involved with Yowie and various other events to maybe outreach, if you want, to make the lives a little bit easier for all the people that want to come and join you in the industry. So I don't know if you want to say any more words on that, because I think that's been quite incredible too.
Yeah, and I think probably that's something I, and as well as, you know, the few female colleagues I've had over the years have found, is that it's quite difficult also to find a balance between, you want to be an example. So, you know, the whole you can't see what you can't be. So you always want to, you know, if there's an opportunity to be on a panel, for example, or an opportunity to give a talk, or to be as part of, you know, an outreach program, you don't want to say no. But I mean, personally, I've been in times, particularly in my PhD, where I ended up saying yes to too many of these things out of feeling like, you know, I wanted to have an impact on the younger girls and so on, that I ended up stretching myself too thin and then not doing as good a job at, you know, my job or my PhD because I was spread too thin, and trying to find a balance there where you set the best example by being good at what you're doing, which often requires focus. And so these days I'll try to be quite selective. I won't say yes to everything. I'll try and pick the ones where I feel I can have the highest impact. And yeah, which unfortunately means saying no sometimes as well. But I think if I look at it as kind of like an entire system where I can have the biggest impact, yeah.
You are a high achiever, so
So for me, the pathway piece is quite important there. So, you know, there's only so much that like one person can inspire if there isn't the structure there to help things happen. And it's something that we are, in more broad terms, getting into the space sector at all is hard, and it's especially hard if you are in Australia, certainly a few years ago. So I don't think anyone came into space through a direct, oh yeah, I'll finish year 12 and then I'll go off and I'll have a space career. So it's one of the things that we can really help do as a university, is help to be that bridge between, you know, school, university, and then helping to, you know, create some spin-out companies, helping to push that national conversation forward, but, you know, importantly, train people as well. So students are important, but so are our staff and our PhD students and our researchers, and even us, you know, even myself. You know, I didn't get into space through a particularly straight line either. It was only through that university process that, yeah, they let us roll the dice. So, you know, it's really important for us to do personal things, but I think the more lasting effort is if we can help to establish a structure that makes it easier for people to do. See, Russell, you're itching to say something.
Oh, just reflecting on the straightness of the line that you took. But we don't need to go there.
Excellent. Okay, we have got, I'm sure I've missed a question here somewhere. How immediate is the need for government policy development to support future missions that build Australian space capability and responsible use of space? And do you see M2 lessons that could help enable and shape such policy development, particularly with departments that are engaged with space but may not see a clear and immediate link? Josh.
Look, I think missions like M2 are hugely important for that, and I think, yeah, Andrew touched on it before. Some of the surprises that you come across can be opportunities, not only for UNSW and Defence to work through what are the requirements for me to meet this mission and the regulatory requirements, but also for the growing Australian space industry and regulatory bodies to learn from these missions as well. I think in terms of, you know, what is their role in that, and you know, what can be learned from the process that was taken to get to the point of having M2 Pathfinder and M2 in space. You know, how can that be improved? And so it provides the opportunity, I think, to learn and shape things moving.
Perhaps if I could add to that, missions like M2 are not the sort of missions that a government agency or an industry player will. There's risk involved in a mission like M2. I used the phrase before, push the boat out missions, really try the difficult, innovative things. A mission like M2 in a university context, but closely connected to agencies, and not just agencies in defence, closely connected to industry players. It enables us to grapple with how you do missions and how you don't do them. It enables the sort of people who are going to be needed in the future in government and in industry to be trained up. In fact, I counted the other day, there's been 19 people have left our team and are out there in the space sector at large, having impact. And it's the skills they bring from a mission like M2. Important to that. The other thing is there is innovation that happens in such crazy missions that wouldn't happen if it was just a simple government procurement of a capability. If there was low tolerance for risk involved, that innovation, it leads to intellectual property, it leads to spin-off companies. Melrose, you mentioned that before. I mean, 3 spin-off companies from our team in just the last 3 or 4 years. But it also leads to data points for those government agencies as they proceed towards very, very large investments of taxpayer money. Thinking at the moment of the 2 defence projects, DEF 799, which is remote sensing, and JP 90102, which is satellite communications. Missions like M2 provide data points for defence to be able to understand, yes, we could go in that direction, and maybe DEF 799 or JP 90102 could involve that, or maybe no, it shouldn't involve some of that. It's actually contributing to risk mitigation in the process.
So we've got time for one more question, and I think it's a good one to end on. So I can start at that end and then sweep around. What's the team working on at the moment? Are there any new projects in development? So I guess really what's next, Andrew?
Okay, well, you said what the team is working on at the moment.
Yeah.
We are absolutely looking at the mission for M2 at the moment to deliver that. So it is also a different ball game to the last 12 months in terms of the design development and really leading that project. It's totally different, but equally rewarding. That said, the discussions before about a reprogrammable platform and all of the bits and pieces that make M2 so complex means that we are looking into 2022 and beyond as to what we can do with these spacecraft, how they fit in, how do we do some extra capability demonstrations. Because now we've got these assets on orbit, if you like, there's opportunity to reap some benefits very early, very quickly by just doing some more development on the ground. And that's very much the case for M2 Pathfinder and the 2 M2 spacecraft. But I'll let the others answer what else might be in the pipeline outside of that.
Courtney, what's next for you?
So I've kind of got tunnel vision on the divorce at the moment. So for the separation, we're targeting first week of August. And at the moment, we're doing, I guess, a lot of rehearsals. We've got testing on the ground. We've got testing on orbit where we're building up all the different, I guess, parts of the divorce in terms of the operation sequence, the commanding that we do, the checks that we do. So we've got some autonomous checks on board the spacecraft to make sure that we're going to be able to divorce safely without having the spacecraft bump into each other on a future orbit. So there's a lot of testing for us to get through there, a lot of data analysis. And I guess there's 2 sides of it. There's making sure that we are able to divorce safely, and also that we've kind of got one chance at this, and there's a lot of really interesting research data that we can get out of it. So making sure that we tick all those boxes with the one chance that we've got is kind of what all the testing is about at the moment, which is quite fun. And after that's over, I'll worry about what comes next.
Cool. Josh, I'm going to be more direct with you. Space Command. What's happening there? I'm sure that's what's next for you, right?
Absolutely. So defence-wide, it's been in the media. That's certainly something coming up and something hugely exciting. So there's, I guess, a large review going on at the moment in terms of the Defence Space Organisation and what needs to happen moving forward in defence with space, both with space capability and organisationally. I think a lot of work still being done in terms of that review and outcomes still to come. So what exactly it will look like in terms of what day to day the organisation will look like is still to come, and I think we'll start to see more of those outcomes in the coming year. We did see Air Vice Marshal Roberts announced as head of Space Directorate, which I think is an absolute win for Defence. She's doing amazing things at the moment in her role as head of Air Force capability, and I think as a hugely passionate space person, I think amazing things to come for Defence in the next year and going forward. I think M2 specifically, I think it's a bit of a switch of mindset for us now. For the life of the program, certainly during my time, there's been a huge focus on the education outcomes and how the satellite programs have flowed into that, and it is now a realization almost that there is a satellite up in space with some really complex payloads. It's switching to that research mindset and mostly tempering expectations and excitement for what we're getting out of that.
Excellent. Just before I turn to Russ for the final word, there are a number of questions we didn't get time to get round to. We will try and answer these in a follow-up email, but for the last word, I'll throw to Russ.
So where to from here? So there's a number of aspects to my answer to that question. We have a fabulous team. We work with a fabulous stakeholder in Air Force. We also work with government more broadly. So there are mission opportunities coming down the pipeline for the nation, and they will be nation building type missions. We've assisted in doing a lot of the feasibility study work for them. Missions that, if funded and brought to fruition, are actually going to make life better for Australians and indeed people all across the world on the ground. And we would be very excited to be part of that. When it comes to the opportunities for Australia, I've been saying for a long time, it's not good enough for Australia to simply invest money to become capable at doing space. The rest of the world's been doing it a lot longer and have a vested interest in continuing to be on the top of their game, and so we're just going to get battered and bruised if that's all we do. We actually have to be doing the sorts of space activities that find niche leadership roles for Australia and for Australian organisations. And those niche areas, they play to our strengths as a nation. We're starting to get good at space, but we're also good at some disruptive technology areas such as quantum technologies, robotic systems, artificial intelligence, and some other ones. And so where I see the future of our particular group going in terms of the technology is to be that organisation in Australia that develops next generation intelligent, networked constellations of intelligent satellites. And I use the word intelligent twice there. The satellites are intelligent, and we're taking baby steps towards that with M2. But the constellation at large, this collection, this organic thing, has its own intelligence and can self-organise. That is the way of the future for the space domain, and it's not very far away. And Australia has the capacity and the know-how to be able to do that, and that's where we want to go. We want to be contributing to the education, in particularly to meet the needs of the new space division, to be providing into that the highly skilled trained workforce that's needed, and then beyond that into the broader sector. And then one final thing, the very longer term opportunity, and it's so critical, and that's to use space for STEM inspiration purposes. It's my belief that space, it is, well, it's a no-brainer that space is inspiring to young people. We don't have to work at that. Space is actually such a complex domain and a complex enabling capability for so many aspects of life on Earth. It's a way in which we can inspire the young people of today to become critical thinkers and to become the future leaders. So we've put together a concept in our team for a national in fact, a Trans-Tasman Space Innovation Challenge that would bring the young people in high schools and universities in contact with developing space missions, but just as, in fact, more importantly, developing the analytics, the artificial intelligence, the data science that will turn space-derived data into information that can be used to solve problems on the ground. There's so much potential there, and this particular group, it's positioned just nicely and has the right skills and expertise to be able to contribute to those activities. So there's a long list of where to from here, but I think it's all upside.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I hope everybody watching has enjoyed hearing everyone's insights. And I guess that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Norris.
Thank you.